Perfect. All right. Well, let's jump right in. And Sean, if you wouldn't mind just keeping an eye, can you see the waiting room
I
from your
don't
view?
see a waiting room. I see a
Okay,
chat. So
no worries. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and let in folks that pop in. Good. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our session, Geography Activities for a Sustainable World. I'm so thrilled. We have a pretty good group here with us this evening. Just wanted to do some quick introductions before we jump into the real meat and fun part of our webinar tonight. So first, my name is Lindsay Bailey. I work for a national nonprofit organization called Population Education, and I will talk in just a moment a little bit more about the Pop Ed program. But I'm joined tonight by a fabulous volunteer with our organization who also does a lot of professional development. So Sean, I'm going to let you quickly introduce yourself as well.
very quickly, I'm Sean O'Neill. I'm a professor of history at Grand Valley State University, and I am former president of the Michigan Council for History Ed, and ongoing board member, and former president of the Historical Society of Michigan. So lots of time in the classrooms.
Excellent. And so tonight, Sean and I will be kind of partnering. I'll be leading us through a series of activities, and Sean will be adding in some of his perspectives and potential ways to extend lessons throughout our time together. He'll also be keeping an eye on the chat, as will I. So at any point, feel free to drop notes or comments or questions in the chat, and we'll make sure that everybody's voice is heard. So as promised, a little background on Pop Ed. Our mission is somewhat twofold. On the one hand, we lead professional development training for K-12 educators, both in service programs at schools and districts, as well as conferences. And we do a lot of work with pre-service teachers as well. And on the other hand, we develop classroom materials for educators. So that includes sort of your classic standards aligned lesson plan, but also supplemental materials, things like videos, posters, case study readings for students. And both of those pieces, the training and the materials, have the same goal of helping educators to cover population and related environmental topics and social topics in their classrooms in a way that's really engaging and hands-on, getting students to really think critically about some important real-world issues. And we'll talk in a moment a little bit more about what some of those issues might be. Our workshops take a couple of different formats thanks to COVID, but I show you this slide just as sort of a heads up that our MO in Pop Ed is to have you all as educators, as much as possible, do the lessons that Sean and I will share as you would, as if you were a student in the classroom. So we'll be doing a little bit of work this evening on some Google slides. We'll be playing some games, hopefully getting some good discussion going. So this is your advance warning that this will be hopefully a really participatory experience. And so when I say population topics, some of you may be thinking, okay, what does that mean? What are some topics that can be related to human population? And at Pop Ed, we think of it in sort of two main thematic buckets, if you will. So on the one hand, we can think about this idea that we have nearly 8 billion people on our planet. And all of these people are using natural resources. We're using energy. Some of us in the world, of course, more than others, right? As we are developing and building, we're impacting habitats and ecosystems. We're impacting our clean water supply. So on the one hand, we're thinking about all of these connections between people and how we impact our planet. And then through our social studies lens, we can think about all of these geography ties. So how people are connected to places, thinking about urbanization trends around the world, or public health, or how education levels, especially among women and girls, can impact population trends. So it's really a cross-curricular topic. And tonight we will be kind of merging these two topics thinking about geography and sustainability. Also, just a heads up, many of our lessons include math skills. So trying to bring in that real world math as much as possible. And as I sort of mentioned at the very beginning, at the end of our session, we will be sharing with you how you can access a full curriculum from Pop Ed. It's an online curriculum. So I'll give you access to our middle school curriculum, which will have all the lessons that we share tonight, plus many, many more. It also includes some of those supplemental things like the readings. There's a whole set of infographics. And I will also be sure to share our elementary curricula for any of you that are teaching elementary as well. We want to make sure you get what's most useful to you. So no need to stress out writing down everything that we say. You'll be able to really easily replicate these lessons in your classrooms with that curriculum in hand. Let's see, with that, I think that's all the kind of housekeeping and introduction I wanted to do. So just a reminder that we will be keeping an eye on the chat for questions and comments, and there will certainly be times where we will ask you questions. So just another reminder to put yourself in the mindset of your students and get ready to have some fun. All right, any questions before we get going here? Awesome, excellent. Okay, well, the very first lesson that I want to share with you this evening is called Earth, the Apple of Our Eye. And this is probably one of our popular activities. It's one that can be done in the upper elementary classroom, the middle school classroom, and the high school classroom, kind of depending on where you go with the discussion afterwards. There also is an early childhood version of this on the elementary curriculum. So for the person who's teaching second grade, keep that in mind as well. And what we're looking at with this lesson is how much land we are using on our planet to grow the food that feeds all of us. It's a pretty important resource, right? We need food, but in order to grow that food, we need land, and not only land, but healthy land, healthy soil. So we are going to pretend that our apple represents our planet. So our apple is serving as a model for our Earth. And I'm going to cut up my apple to find the amount of land that we use to grow all of our food. So I'm actually going to stop my screen share. And I would recommend putting your settings on speaker view or sort of pinning me so that you can see me nice and big on your screen here. So the first thing that I am going to do is cut my apple into 4 equal pieces. Best I can. I need a sharper knife, I think. Okay. So here's where you all get to drop some things in the chat. So I have 3 of those 4 pieces in my hand. Now, knowing what you know about the Earth, what do you think these 3 pieces represent? Awesome. Joy says water. Annette says oceans. Annette, you're very close, but it is actually the bigger category of just all water on Earth. So it includes oceans, but also lakes and rivers and streams and whatnot. So that's about 75% of our Earth's surface, right? And you can do this with a map or a globe next to you to point out some of these geographic features. So about 1/4 of the Earth's surface is covered in land. So let's divide this up and see what that looks like. So what I'm going to do now is take my quarter and cut it into 3 equal pieces. So I have one of those pieces in my hand. We could think about what fraction this is, right? We could ask our students. The quarter divided into 3, and if I'm holding up 1, this is 1/12 of our whole planet. Now, this is land that we call inhospitable. So it is not habitable, meaning people can't live there. It's too harsh, or not in any sort of statistically significant quantities. And if it's too harsh for people, you know what, it's too harsh to grow crops for agriculture as well. So any ideas what type of land this might be if it's inhospitable, too harsh for people and plants? Yeah, Elaine, it could be too cold, like Arctic regions, exactly. Joy says deserts, 100%. Oh, and Nanette, yes, you've got so many categories there. Yeah, mountains is the last big category. So it's sort of our high altitude rocky mountain peaks. Rainforest, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's not actually in this category. That'll be covered in just a moment here. So desert, Arctic regions, your Rocky Mountain peaks goes here. So I'm left with 2/12 of my apple, or 1/6. And if this is inhabitable, this is all the habitable land on our planet where people can live, and we could grow crops. But we don't use all of this land, obviously, to grow crops, right? So I'm going to take 1/12 away, and I'm left with 1/12. And this would be the habitable land that we're not using for agriculture. So what do we think we're doing with this land? What is here, or not doing, maybe I should say? Yeah, guesses? Ideas? This is a little bit trickier. So yeah, Annette, this could be land that it's maybe not arable for some reason. The land might be too rocky or too dry or not have the right nutrients. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, some of this is land that we have developed, that we're using as humans to support us, our roads, our schools, our shopping malls, our houses. But that's actually a really small percentage of this. It's only about 1%. So the vast majority of this habitable land that's not being used for agriculture is actually wild lands, our forests, our shrublands, our sort of natural wild areas that of course are really important for wildlife, biodiversity, providing habitats and homes for all these animals and species. So I'm going to put this aside and we're left with 1/12, right? And so this is all the land that we're using to grow our crops that feed us. And what I'm going to do, just to kind of be dramatic or perhaps more accurate, is as best I can peel the peel of my apple, because really we don't use the core of the earth or the mantle, right? The important part here is the crust, the earth's crust. And so that's going to be represented by our apple peel. And we don't use all of this land in exactly the same way either, all this agricultural land. So I've got my 1/12 and I'm actually going to cut it into, whoops, flying apple, 4 equal pieces. And this is the part that I think is really interesting. So I'm holding up one of those pieces. So this is 1/48 of our entire apple, or 1/4 of our agricultural land. Now, this land is used to grow crops that are directly consumed by us as humans. So it's sort of what you typically would think of as your vegetables, your fruits, your beans, your grains. That's this. So what do we think is happening with the rest of our agricultural land? 3/4 of our agricultural land. And I'm moving through this kind of quickly. If you did this with students, you'd want to give them time to kind of ponder and reflect. For you all, it looks like we don't have thoughts in the chat. That's okay. So I'll just tell you. Oh, Joy, perfect. Save the day. Yeah, this is not just land that's used for animal feed, but also for animal grazing. So any sort of livestock production would be on this land here. So that's the end of the demonstration itself. And then sort of your discussion and follow-up as a teacher can vary depending on what area you want to focus on and of course your grade level. So I'm going to get back to my PowerPoint and we can talk about some of that. So in the lesson plan, there's a number of different discussion questions. These are just some examples here on my screen. One thing, of course, you can talk about with students is why they think there might be so much more agricultural land being used for livestock as opposed to crops directly consumed by humans. And then this, I think, is really interesting, having them think about how these segments of land will change as population grows. So what might increase and what might decrease over time. Or thinking historically, how have these pieces changed over time and when? There's a second part to this activity as well, which has students digging deeper into some different aspects of soil health. For all the different levels of this, starting from upper elementary through high school, students are asked to read an article from National Geographic. The article has been leveled by News ELA, so you can print it at your students' reading level really easily. And what they do essentially is identify some different threats to soil health, and then in small groups, research a particular threat, and then using their research, they're asked to propose a solution to their specific soil threat that they researched. Like I said, there is a lower elementary version of this that doesn't get quite in depth, but certainly check that out on the curriculum if you teach those lower elementary grades. Let's see, Sean, did you have any comments or thoughts or things to add to this one before I open it up to questions?
No, I didn't have anything to add. I was wondering about how younger grades might be involved in cutting the apple, but do we have to work with plastic knives or something other than an apple to make that doable?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm actually really glad you mentioned that because, well, a couple of different things. You could, I've seen teachers kind of just do the apple as a demo at the front of the class. And then we also have a pie chart worksheet that students can be filling in to really reinforce the fractions and follow along with the teacher as they cut. But another option that's actually in the lesson plan is to use, instead of an apple, to use a ball of Play-Doh. And if you let it harden just a little bit and then have students or you, the teacher, cutting it with floss, that actually works pretty well. It is a nice alternative to that. And for the lower elementary one, we actually have them decorating a cookie. So there's no knife involved in that one. But I'm glad you brought that up. Any questions or comments? Awesome. Oh, Elaine, I love these comments in the chat. Yeah, already throwing out some ideas for more sustainable farming practices, growing vertical. Yep. Awesome. Awesome. Love all these comments in the chat. Thank you all. Perfect. All right. Well, I'm going to keep moving right along if there aren't any other questions so we can cover all of the activities we have tonight. This next lesson is another one that is, the way I'll present it, it can work for upper elementary through high school. And I will try to remember to mention the lower elementary adaptation of this as well, so that Kelly, you can look it up on the elementary curriculum. But this one is essentially a game about the challenges that arise when we try to share things, resources, among a group. So we are going to actually try to play this game as best we can through a digital tool. So what I'm going to do is drop a link in the chat. And what I'm going to ask you all to do is go ahead and click that link that I just put in the chat. And what should happen, if I've done this correctly, is that you should see, yay, I see some of you here. You should see a slide that looks like what you see on my screen now. So let's see, how many people do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, you know what I'm going to ask you all to join me down here on slide 4. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but the digital tools that I share with you all, you will also have access to, whether you want to use them for supplementing in person or hopefully not remote teaching, but who knows. But you'll have access to all of our digital tools as well. Okay, so now that we have most everybody in slide 4, the first thing that we're going to need to do before I explain the rules of the game is add our names to our little, I'll call them cubbies up here. And let's see, Sean, I think because of numbers, you and I might both have to play as well.
Okay.
So if you want to grab a cubby, that would be great. So like I said, select any of these rectangles and just type your name right in there so that we know it is yours. And then once we have our names filled in, we can play the game. And, I should mention too, if you are joining the session from a handheld device, an iPhone or a tablet, it might be a little bit harder to interact with the slide. They just aren't, the Google tools aren't real compatible with handheld devices. So let's see how many people we can get in here. And we will make do. Either way, I will keep, you all can see my screen. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I will keep this on the screen so that anybody who's not able to interact can still follow along. All right. It looks like we're still needing a couple squares. So I am going to play for my son, Oliver, and my dog, Lloyd. All right. That'll be close enough, I think. Okay. And we're going to do this digitally, and then I will explain how this would look in person. So like I said, this is a game, and the rules of the game are this. The chips in the center pool here, this blue oval area, belong to all of us that are playing the game. In a moment, I am going to sing happy birthday. Does anybody happen to have a birthday in April? No. Shoot, thought I might get lucky. Sean, can I sing happy birthday to you?
But it's in March.
Oh, Elaine, your son. What's your son's name? There's be a little delay here. Pablo. Okay, so we'll sing happy birthday to Pablo. Perfect. Well, I sing happy birthday to Elaine's son, Pablo. You all may take chips out of this center pool. And after I explain the rules, we can practice doing that. Once you get 10 chips in your cubby, then you can trade it in for a gold star. So that's your goal, is to get 10 chips so that you can trade them in for a gold star. Once you've taken a chip out of the pool, you may not put it back in. And when the song is over, when I'm done singing happy birthday, I'm going to double the number of chips that are in this center pool that are left there, but there will never be more than there are right now, which is 21. Okay. So we'll let that sink in. As it does, I'm going to just ask you all, if you're playing the game, to practice moving just one chip into your cubby and then move it back, just so you get the hang of how to move these around the screen before things get wild here. All right, excellent. So here are the rules one more time. The chips in the center belong to the people that are playing the game. I'm going to sing happy birthday. While I'm singing, you may take chips out of the pool and move them over into your cubby. You may only take one chip at a time. I didn't mention this, but only one chip at a time, no grabbing the whole thing. Once you get 10 chips, you can trade it in for a gold star. Once you've taken a chip out, you may not put it back in. And at the end of the song, I'll double the number of chips left in the pool, but there will never be more than 21, which is what there are right now. Okay, everybody ready? Here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Pablo. Happy birthday to you. Ooh, okay. All right. So let's see what happened here. Annette, you got kind of a lot here. 2, 4, 6. Oh, 7. Close, but didn't make it. 2, 4, 6. Kelly, you too. 7. Okay, well, no worries. I will double the number left in the pool. Darn, we can't double 0, right? There's nothing left in the pool. So technically the game's over. We all didn't play so well. That didn't work out so well, right? So if we were doing this with students, we would let this play out a little bit longer. We would see if their strategy changed because this didn't work so well. For time's sake, what I'm going to do is I am going to spend some time moving all of our chips back into the center pool. And while I do that, those of you that are playing the game, or even those of you that are just watching, drop some ideas in the chat of how you'd like to change the way that you played this, because we're going to play a couple, well, maybe not a couple, 1 or 2 more rounds. So talk to each other. You can unmute yourself too. Talk to each other either verbally or in the chat. How would you like to play this game differently? Think about the rules and what strategy might work. I'll give you like 10 seconds. What do you all think? Any ideas? Oh, Annette, you said team up with someone. Do you want to elaborate on that? Okay. We each get a partner. Oh, so are you thinking then that you would share? So maybe if one person, like between the 2 of you, you get 10? Okay, that could work. Joy says we need to leave chips in the pool so that she can replenish them until she's out of chips. Joy, you're on to something. Yeah, because, right, I'll double the number of chips in the pool, but there will never be more than there are right now at the beginning, which is 21. So think about how many chips should be left in the pool in order to sort of maximize that doubling that I'll do. Okay, you guys are getting closer. A limit for each person. So Kelly, we can't leave, well, we could leave 21, but then they wouldn't keep getting bigger. There's a maximum of 21. So if there were 21 left in the pool, I couldn't double it. It would just stay 21. So how much do you think should be left in the pool that would kind of maximize that doubling? 11 chips can be pulled. So between that, Joy, 11 chips can be pulled, and this idea of setting a limit per person. Does anybody have ideas on how many each person should take? Yeah. So Joy says 1 chip per person. So let's give that a try. Okay. Here we go. Everybody ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Pablo. Happy birthday to you. Oh, we've got one crossing the line here. Sometimes that happens. Perfect. Okay, so everybody took 1 chip. I took chips for our imaginary players here. So let's see, we should have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 left in the center. I would double 11 to 22, but there can never be more than 21. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to get us back to our capacity of 21. Let's do it again. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Pablo. Happy birthday to you. Oops, I forgot to take one for Oliver. It's okay. Perfect. All right. So again, we would have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Ooh, Sean, I think you did something sneaky. Do you want to explain why you did that?
No, I did. I was on the wrong page. I was doing the wrong thing. And when I
Oh,
went to the right one, there were already 2 in my spot. So I didn't move them. So
no
yeah, I
worries.
ended up with 3 though.
Yeah, and the
Great
reason
one.
I asked that is because you might have a student that realizes that we're kind of missing out on using one of these chips, right? Because if we always end with 11 in the center, then that 11th one doesn't have any doubling power, essentially. And so one student might actually be like, might as well just take that one, right? Instead of leaving it there to just kind of sit and not do anything. So again, in a classroom, you would want this to play out, let them continue and see if their strategy keeps working. For time's sake, though, I want to stop our simulation there and have some discussion. So you all can join me back in the Zoom. Actually, you know what? I'm going to keep this up while we talk. So what do we think these chips represent in this game? It was fun, wasn't it, Elaine? I love that one. What do you think the point is? What do these chips represent? Any ideas? I gave you a little hint when I was introducing. Yeah, Kelly and Annette, that's right. Resources, but specifically because these resources can renew, they can regenerate. These are renewable resources, right? So it's not things like our oil or minerals that we're mining out of the ground. For example, it's things like trees. Elaine, that's right, crops, fish, right? So anything that if we leave enough, it can renew or regenerate. And so that first round, when all I told you was, hey, try to get 10 chips and then you can trade it in for a star, it didn't work very well, right? Everybody was kind of out for themselves, just scrambling, trying to grab as many chips as they could. And then there was nothing left. We couldn't pull trees out of thin air, right? If there's no trees left, there's nothing we can do from that point. So that didn't work very well. And you can use this, especially if you're teaching middle school or high school, as an example of tragedy of the commons, right? But then after we sort of changed our tactic and we realized that wasn't working, we communicated, we cooperated, we came up with a plan, a way to manage essentially this resource in a way that was sustainable, to figure out how it could continue to regenerate in a sustainable way. And our plan also happened to be equal. Everybody got an equal share of this resource. And of course, that's what we need to do in the real world, right? When we're thinking about managing our resources, we need to cooperate and problem solve and communicate in order to make sure they can continue to support us for generations to come. Yeah, right, a time limit to use the resource. Elaine, do you want to elaborate on that? Do you mean in the game, or are you thinking about like in the real world resources? Yeah, exactly. Not to waste valuable resources. Yeah, and kind of consider the implications of our actions on, the future, but also on other people that we're sharing our resources with. Absolutely. And don't be surprised, if you are at the point in the game where your students have come up with a plan, and they seem to be following the plan round after round, and maybe one student is like, you know what, I'm tired of waiting, and they just swipe all the resources for themselves. Everybody will be pretty upset, right? But does that happen in the real world? Of course, absolutely. So it's a really teachable moment. So just kind of a heads up on that. In person, the way this would look, if you look on slide 2 of these slides, it gives you sort of an idea. We recommend using poker chips as these chips on the screen and just setting them out on a table surface. The lesson plan tells you how many chips to put in the pool based on the number of students that are playing the game. You'd probably want all of your students to be playing, so you might need to set up kind of a couple of different simulations around the room at the same time. What's really important in person that I didn't specify virtually because it's not as important is that first round or first few rounds, there's no communication among your students. So they're not talking to each other at the beginning. So you really see that competition come out. And then, of course, like we did, allow them to talk and strategize and see if they're able to manage this resource. So that's for the common good. Let's see, I'll get back to my slides now. These discussion questions we kind of already covered, so I won't really go into that. But I do want to mention for second grade, the version for early elementary on the elementary curriculum is called Go Fish, where students are attempting to share a bowl of goldfish crackers. There's not as many complicated rules, and I'll put that in the chat in case you want to write that down, Kelly. But it's a great one for introducing this concept of sharing and managing something sustainably. Let's see, questions, comments, thoughts? Sean, any additions or things that I forgot that might be helpful to add?
No, I think you're doing a great job covering it. I think this is one of those moments or examples of lessons where the students in the social studies class who are good at math are going to figure it out ahead of the rest. This is very much a strategy type game that those who are gamers or mathematicians, you need them to figure it out.
Yeah, definitely. It is a real sort of problem solving activity and shows them, you know, in the real world, social studies and geography, they operate sort of in connection with all the other content areas. So a good lesson there. Awesome. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Not, we'll keep on going. So the last activity that I wanted to share with you is called In Search of Sustainable Life. This one is pretty firmly designed for students in middle school and high school. So keep that in mind. There certainly might be ways to adapt it for lower elementary. But in this one, we have students thinking about, you know, what does the word sustainability even mean? But then moving into sort of what would a sustainable community look like? And then lastly, identifying the most important factors that they think would be in a sustainable community, and then thinking about how those factors might look in their own community. So it sort of starts with this really broad, high-level concept, and then slowly brings it down to a really local perspective for them. So the first part of the lesson is just a warm-up where, one, we have students kind of making a working definition for what sustainability means. And as part of that, looking at these images, these are right in the lesson plan for you, and having them determine, you know, does this look like a sustainable community, and why or why not, or what aspects of this are sustainable and what might not be. And then after that, we ask students to just do a bit of a brainstorm. This can happen in small groups or as a whole class, having them just think about what some factors of sustainability might be. And if they don't come to it on their own, you might need to introduce these 3 different types of sustainability, because often, even as adults, when we think of sustainability, we tend to think of just environmental sustainability, right? This idea of natural resources and habitats, clean water, public transportation, renewable energy, all of these things. But we can think about human or social sustainability as well. So anything that might relate to the health and happiness of individuals in a community. So things like access to high quality education, access to quality healthcare, making sure that the community is safe. Or we can think about economic sustainability. So related to kind of money and businesses, making sure that there's job opportunities and equal pay, things like that. So after students have brainstormed, you might kind of want to try to group their sustainability factors into these 3 different categories: human, social, environmental, and economic. And then from there, try to narrow down as a class the 10 factors that they think are most important to a sustainable community. And ideally, you would have a mix of these 3 different types. And so we call this their sustainability index. And they'll use this index in the next part of the activity. So once they have these 10 factors of sustainability that they think are really important for communities, we recommend breaking students into either pairs or small groups, depending on kind of how big your class is. And each pair or small group would be in charge of 1 factor. So you could either assign them a factor or let them kind of choose the factor that they're most passionate about. And then in the lesson, we call this a foldable. So you can see a picture of it on my screen. We'd ask them to write their factor on the bottom. And then on this first flap of the foldable, they're considering, what do we know about this factor in our community? And then they can flip it up and they can write what they know about it. So in my example here, the factor is green space. That would be kind of a mix between environmental sustainability, but I would think also sort of that human social sustainability, right? Helping with happiness levels. So what do we observe about that in our community? They could say the highways have green space in the middle. Lots of people have big lawns. There's a lot of trees by our school. Anything that they observe related to their factor. And then in the middle flap here, they're thinking about improvements that could be made to their factor in their community. So what can we do to improve the factor? Maybe if they notice, there's not many trees by my home, they could plant a bunch of trees in their neighborhood. If there's not many parks, they could talk to the city government to try to transition some abandoned lots into park space, things like that. And then of course, there's always challenges when we're trying to do these big things. So what are some challenges that they might face in making these improvements? Getting money for a tree, right? Convincing the owner of the lot to change it into a park, or making sure that somebody will be taking care of upkeep in the park. So kind of going through all of these different steps. And then this activity has a lot of really rich opportunities for follow-up. So for example, students could, as a follow-up to this, actually try to gather evidence and data for how their community is doing on their particular factor, or even any of the other factors that other groups worked on. So for example, as you can see on the screen here, figuring out how many people are actually participating in recycling, that kind of thing. They could select a factor and actually kind of build out a proposal. So rather than just thinking about a proposed solution and obstacles, take it a step further and create a proposal and submit it to the city government or the leadership and see what happens. And then another interesting thing to do is to take another community, whether it's somewhere else in the United States or in your state or even internationally, and have them do a little bit of research and see how the 2 different communities might compare in terms of these factors that they came up with. So a lot of opportunity for kind of student choice in building their index and getting buy-in from students, and a lot of great sort of thinking exercises here as well. Questions, comments, thoughts? We just have a few more minutes here. Awesome. Oh, I see something in the chat. Ooh, Elaine, I love that. Plan a local trip to a sustainable community. Yeah. Have them making observations. That's great. Yeah, and that kind of makes me think too, on the curriculum that you'll be receiving, one of the things that's included is case study readings. And we try to, as much as possible, have a lot of case study readings that highlight positive things that are happening both here in the US and around the world in terms of sustainability and sustainable development, because it's always empowering and inspiring for students to hear and see those positive stories. We don't want students to be left feeling in a place of doom and gloom after learning about some of these issues. We want them to know that positive change is possible and that they can be the ones to do that. So Elaine, that kind of goes hand in hand with showing them examples of positive things going on. Awesome. All right, so we covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. Just a little housekeeping before I share the curriculum with you. For attendance purposes on my end, it looks like a lot of you have already dropped your names in the chat, but if you wouldn't mind just doing that so that I have a record of who attended, that would be really great. And then if you are interested in signing up for our newsletter, it's totally free. It comes out every other month. It's a great way to just stay in touch with our program. We've put in updates on new curriculum and lesson plans, on a student video contest, any sort of opportunities to continue learning with us will be in that newsletter. So drop your email in the chat if you're interested in signing up for that. I am going to drop a link in the chat to a short evaluation form, which if you have time, you don't need to do it now, but if you have time after the session to fill that out, we always like to get feedback from educators. So I'll drop it again so it doesn't get buried. And then for the curriculum, if you are watching this as a recording, what you're going to need to do is screenshot this slide that you see so that you can type all of these important URLs into your browser. Those of you that are here live, what I'm going to do is drop a link in the chat right now. It's the one that's labeled link to all resources. And that will take you to this document that you see on my screen here. So let me know if you're not able to access that. And what you see here are lots of different links. This first one here is going to be the most important because this is the link to your curriculum. So you can see when I click on that, a link to a PDF comes up. And then it has a URL and a code to set up an account for our middle school curriculum. For Kelly, I'm dropping the link to the PDF for our Counting on People, our elementary curriculum, so you can grab that there. So make sure you do that so that you can get that curriculum. This next link here is to access all of our digital tools. I'll take you to a page on our site that looks like this. When we click this, you go to our PopEd Google Drive, where all of these different folders are lessons that have a digital tool associated. So there is one for In Search of Sustainable Life, for example, that we didn't use tonight, but you can certainly check that out. These additional links here are just for additional resources that we've put out, websites, videos, lots and lots of different things. Here's the link for the evaluation again. And then lastly, I'll just mention, I'll go back to my slides for this, because that last link on your document there was to get information about joining our volunteer trainer network. Most of our workshops that we lead are led by a fantastic network of volunteer facilitators like Sean himself that lead workshops in their local areas. So if that's something that you would be interested in, we would certainly love to have you on board. And I think that is about it. That takes us to 7:30. Any last lingering questions or thoughts, or Sean, things that you want to add about the lessons or anything that I forgot to mention?
I can't imagine anything you might have forgotten to mention, but there are many lessons on the site and many lessons in the Pop Ed workshops for the training. There are many good ideas, and I'm really impressed that they've managed to flip to this digital age. I saw them all in person from before COVID, but that's very good. I would encourage people to think about interviewing their city manager or their local government when it comes to sustainability. You could start by interviewing the city council or city manager about what the city is doing about sustainability, and then take that to some topics they might investigate so they can look into that. My city had a discussion just last night about making the city sustainable. So it's very much a current topic locally.
That's excellent. Yeah, that's a really great point and a good idea. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I guess if that's all, I'll just say, thank you so much for joining us. If you have questions or thoughts or comments, feel free to reach out directly to our emails here and follow us on social media. And if anybody is having trouble accessing this all resources doc with all of the goodies, let me know. But hopefully that's going smooth for everyone. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of the conference.